Welcome to the first episode of the Ice Prep Podcast, and for those of us joining us here on CJBK, thank you and welcome. My name is Brian Wood. I am the co-host of the show, joined by Pat Leyland. Hey, Pat, how's it going?
Not bad at all.
And normally we would be diving more into the fun side of hockey, everything going on in the world, the stats, the this and that, because that's honestly what you and I talk about on a daily basis. And I think it drives both of our significant others insane, if we're being honest.
Yeah, it's good to have an outlet finally, because I know that my wife would not be thrilled to be listening about any more shot statistics.
But for today, with all of the news that has come out with the Chicago Blackhawks organization, we have to start there. It's something that we have to dive into, and especially after finding out on Wednesday evening who John Doe is. Kyle Beach, 11th overall draft pick from the Blackhawks, outed himself as John Doe to Rick Westhead on TSN in an interview. And the details of this story are shocking, unbelievable. And in the 24 hours since, because we are currently recording, it's Thursday afternoon, October 28th. It's only getting crazier and crazier.
Yeah, it's a lot. Like when you hear about everything that's coming out, I mean, after years of them trying to push it aside, his story, Kyle Beach's story, is finally out there, and more keeps coming forward, and it's most likely to continue for a while. And it's awful. But as more information comes to light, there's going to be a lot of unfortunately blame and finger pointing, and you can only imagine what's going to happen on Twitter with all the users on there. But I think the one thing that's really, really important is to keep in mind is Kyle Beach and anybody else that's been unfortunately affected by this, whether it was them themselves personally or just people in his life. Kyle Beach's life was completely upended. His career in the NHL was completely ruined by Brad Aldrich, whose name is unfortunately on the Stanley Cup. His, like many others, their lives will never be the same. This sadly isn't something that is isolated to one person as well. It stretches far beyond the sport of hockey, and there needs to be support and resources for those people that have suffered from something along the lines of this, as well as there has to be a culture change so that we don't have these terrible people doing these terrible things to completely innocent people and getting free passes just because it was the benefit for a team or a company or anything else. It's disgusting what has happened. And that the Chicago Blackhawks administration and the team members felt it was acceptable to ignore because they wanted to focus on the Stanley Cup it's unacceptable.
And to not get into too many of the details for those that may not have heard the story, but at this point it's been everywhere. This happens during the Western Conference Finals in the 2010 Stanley Cup playoffs. You can see the full details, tsn.ca. There's articles there going over it all. We won't go into it here. But the fact that the team decided, and this has come out, that, well, we can't distract the players with this story, and they basically brushed it under the rug. And as you said, it's actually something that's been discussed earlier today, is about his name, Brad Aldrich's name, not being removed from the Stanley Cup, though it seems like there could be the chance that something that they've done before, they don't remove the name, they put X's over all of it, which if you look online, there's a lot of support for that, because then that leads to, well, why is it like that? And then it brings up why hockey culture has to change, why this can't be allowed. And it's crazy. The more you read into this story, I know for a fact my wife hadn't heard much about it, started to see this and had asked me about it, and trying to explain it. It's such a difficult thing to hear, especially when you know how common it actually is. And there's been a lot of players, former players, that have come out and have said it's everywhere. It's not like this is an isolated incident.
Yeah, like I said before, it's completely unacceptable that this has happened in the first place. And yeah, it's not just hockey, it's everywhere. And I mean, you look at the stats, and it's 1 in 6 men experience.
Yeah, and one in 6. There's an organization for that. on, I believe, almost all of Kyle Beach's hockey database website profiles now. That link to that organization has been added. So even the people outside of the actual hockey world are trying to do the little bit that they can to help step towards the cause, to get this out into the open. And we actually have a piece from the interview that aired Wednesday night on TSN, Rick Westhead talking to Kyle Beach, that it's kind of not all doom and gloom, or he's hoping that there can at least be some hope going forward.
Kyle, where do you go from here? You know, you've now talked publicly about this. Do you have any sense for how, and you talked about how this will affect you for the rest of your life, how do you take something so horrible and try to find something positive in that, whether it's serving, you know, the public or reaching out to other abuse survivors? Have you thought about where you go from here?
To be honest, I haven't had the chance. This is all so fresh. But the one thing that I want to make sure that comes from this is change. I want to make sure in any way possible that this does not happen to somebody else, because it will happen again. I will not be the only one. Whether it's in hockey, soccer, any sport, any business, any company, there needs to be a system in place that it gets dealt with, and that it's somebody making the decision to deal with it that has no skin in the game. Because if this would have been reported to somebody other than John McDonough or Joel Quenneville or Stan Bowman that didn't have skin in the game of winning a Stanley Cup, it would have been dealt with, and it would have protected all of the survivors that came after me. So I would love to be able to help. I would love to be able to advocate. I would love to be able to support survivors in coming out and coming forward. I'd love to be there in any way possible. And I would love to be a part of a group that really comes up and designs a system to make sure that there is a safe place in the sports world, and that there is a safe place that every child or adult, male or female, can go if they are in trouble or if they feel uncomfortable, where they won't be judged and they won't have to go through what I did.
And that was Kyle Beach talking with Rick Westhead last night. You can find the full interview, tsn.ca. And there's something in there that we didn't really talk about, and that is some of the major people that are still, minus Stan Bowman now. He resigned from the Chicago Blackhawks as GM on Tuesday, and as well USA Hockey. There's Coach Quenneville, who is still in the NHL, who still coached after this interview last night for the Florida Panthers, who just as of a few minutes ago got out of a interview with the commissioner of the NHL, Gary Bettman. There's also Cheveldayoff, who was the assistant general manager, who is the current general manager of the Winnipeg Jets. So it's not just a Chicago thing. It expands out. And there's so much more to this that if you follow Rick Westhead, this is the exact same time, the exact same year that all of the Akeem Alou racial taunts and slurs were going on in the same organization, which shows it was from bottom to top. There was a major problem, and it's come out since that the players had denied knowing anything. In that interview, Kyle says everybody knew, which is unreal, that nothing was done.
And like, I can't believe that no player knew. And you look at Jonathan Toews, and for myself, you know, it really hurts me, because I always thought Jonathan Toews was just a really stand-up, fantastic person. And to see his response to it, and so as much as he tried, you can tell it almost was like he had a speechwriter pre-prepare something for him. They had no idea what they were writing about. It's just the words that he said were so ingenuine and so flippant It just doesn't come across. It was almost disrespectful, the fact that he thought that this would be okay to say. So the fact that he thought it was okay to say immediately after the game that they just had lost, that I have a lot of respect for them as people. Them meaning Bowman and anybody else that was brought up or anything like that. It's unbelievable. I've used that word so many times in this recording, and like I'm in shock. I can't believe that he thinks that is the way to approach it. And as the captain, he can't just sit there and pretend like he had his fingers in his ears. He's supposed to have the pulse on these things. It's inexcusable. Like there's no way he didn't know.
He had the chance to step up because he was the captain of the Blackhawks when this all went down. And everybody's saying he was 22 years old. That should not matter. He had the chance to come out and apologize, to say, I wish I would have done more. Instead, the lasting words that people are grasping onto is him saying that I have a lot of respect for them as people. They're good people. They knew about all of this. They let it go on. They swept it under the rug. They allowed Aldrich to go to another team to sexually assault a minor, which he ended up getting charged for. They could have stopped that cycle. They chose not to. Jonathan Toews decided to commend those people. That is why so many people are angry right now. And if you're not, then I don't know, because this isn't an isolated story. There has been so many in the OHL near where we are. Everybody should know about this and should be disgusted.
If you don't think there's anything wrong with this, then you really need to take a good hard look in the mirror. We're not here to point fingers, to point blame, to do anything like that. That's not our role. We're just two guys that are here to talk about hockey. But at the end of the day, this is wrong. Everything that happened is completely wrong. And the people that were involved that decided that winning a Stanley Cup and celebrating with the team and allowing Brad Aldridge to do all of that and just sweeping it under the rug, thinking that is okay and acceptable, it's just absolutely abhorrent. It's wrong. And they don't deserve to be in the NHL any longer. They don't deserve to have their names on the cup. Like, it's unreal. You never would have expected. I mean,
especially of Toews, you'd never expect that. He is known as being the ultimate captain, the ultimate I will have your back. He's Captain Serious. That is kind of the joke, but he's supposed to be this figure that he'll make sure that everything is good, that everything is all right. Instead, you've got the coach of the Carolina Hurricanes who had come out yesterday and was asked what change needs to happen to prevent this. Rod Brindamore saying transparency. Players have to have a voice and it needs to be heard. And appropriate action needs to take place. No point in pushing things under the rug. That is from a former NHL player, a Stanley Cup winner, now current coach in the NHL. That is what he is saying. That is word for word what Toews should have said, except defending and apologizing to his former teammate.
And then you look at their responses. So Cheveldayoff and Quenneville, on top of the planned meetings, and then it's just like the NHL are like, oh, okay, so because of these two bad guys in the company, in our industry, we're going to send out an email memo about culture. That'll fix it. Like $2 million fine, $2 million. How much? You're a New Jersey Devils fan. How much did you get fined for Ilya Kovalchuk's wonky contract dealings?
$3 million, first round draft pick, which they eventually got back, and another draft pick. And the thing that it didn't bother me as much at first hearing about the $2 million, but the owners of the Blackhawks have been absolved of any blame or knowing in this. They're the ones who are paying the fine. That's the part that a lot of people aren't realizing, that people that had no idea, they're the ones paying the $2 million. Yes, they are a $1.1 billion franchise. It should be every single person involved in those meetings, all of the players that were throwing the homophobic slurs on the ice that are forced to pay the fines, not the owners. It's unbelievable. And at least today, we are starting to see a few former players, a few current players saying stuff online, showing their support for Kyle Beach. But it's unreal that nobody who was on that team has said anything. Duncan Keith went into a turtle shell when asked about it from the Edmonton media. It was basically, I didn't know what was happening. I didn't know what was going on. Everybody knew. The reports have come out that every single player knew, and apparently even staff that had nothing to do with the on-ice product knew what was happening.
It's crazy that every other organization, not every other, but like you look at all the other organizations out there right now, and they are showing support and they're doing these things and they're saying these things like Tortorella. He's not even part of a team right now, but he even said when asked about it, if this was your 20-year-old kid, wouldn't your decision be different? Like the fact that they couldn't even make that correlation. Like if that was your own kid, wouldn't
or your nephew or a neighbor or a friend, he's just our 11th overall draft pick. Who cares? There's so much more to this story. We could talk about this all day, honestly. We would probably get a little too heated because it's to think that this happened and that people brushed it under the rug. But we're going to take a break from this. Strongly encourage everybody that is listening to please look into this. Watch the press conference that the lawyers did. That one came out, I believe that was early Wednesday, or it might have been Tuesday. I can't remember the exact timeline. That was the big document that had come out as well. The interview that Rick Westhead did with Kyle Beach that you can find on tsn.ca. Learn about what happened, even if the topic is uncomfortable for you, because you never know if something like this could come up in your life, or if it has and you haven't realized it. Learn how you can provide support, how you can help. Collectively, we can try to make it so that behavior like this no longer exists. It's up to us. Yes, it is up to everybody else as well, but you have a major part to play in this by not ignoring it if you see it, because it exists in our workplace, in our hobbies, and in our lives.
All right, welcome back. We're going to have to move on to hockey. We're here to talk about hockey. Let's talk about hockey. Obviously, that was important, but let's focus on hockey, the games that have happened, the games that are coming up. The one thing that I kind of really want to dive into just a little bit, just kind of, dip our toe into, is this year has started off very weird when it comes to the standings, when it comes to the points, when it comes to everything in the NHL. You've got teams like Vegas that are supposed to be like they are up there to winning the President's Trophy. They're supposed to be right up there, and they have 0% on the power play. They've had 15 chances on the power play, and they have 0 goals. And like, I get that there's an art and an intricacy and everything that goes into scoring a goal. I understand that, but 0. What?
Well, it's not even just 0. Almost every single one of the bottom 10 power play teams right now top the standings last year, top the power play percentage. It makes no sense. I don't know if teams have figured out, hey, this is the style that they're going to go, or if it's just one of those they're trying to do a little bit too much with the puck. But you look at quarterback players like Makar. By now, Colorado should be at a ridiculous percent like they were. Tampa Bay, if you watched them last year in the playoffs, if they were on the power play, it was like they're going to score. It's just a matter of at what second of that 2 minutes are they going to. And this year, it's just not there. It makes no sense. But as somebody who's got a team that wasn't so good last year, who's been half decent on the power play, I'm enjoying it.
Well, and I'm a Colorado fan, so I don't really like that you called me out right there. But the one thing that I find really interesting is, so we're looking at it the lens of, what's wrong. And it's really the question at this point of what's right. So clearly what people have been doing, what a lot of the coaching staff, like in my opinion, they've taken a step back and they thought to themselves, you know what? Let's take a look and see what they're doing that makes them so damn successful on the power play, and let's shut that down. I mean, Leafs aside, they've been terrible the past. Like last year, they were awful on the power play, and we'll get to the Leafs a little bit later. But you look at Colorado, and obviously I'm a little bit of a homer, big fan of Colorado, but they were doing things on the power play that they would change it up each time. They were able to manipulate the puck a little bit different. Every time you saw the power play, it didn't look the same. The teams have forced them to look the same every single time. The way that they're defending them is different. I've been watching it because I was curious if this was the reason, and it's gotta be. And I mean, if that is what they've done, they took a step back. They said to themselves, how do we shut this down? They're too successful. And they're able to do this. Kudos. Like, wow, that's fantastic. Fantastic coaching.
Well, it's almost like a good portion of the NHL went, well, our fourth line, what do we want to do with? Because once upon a time, that was your goon squad. Lately, it's been, let's put the cheapest guys we can find there because we're going to be within a few dollars of the cap. But if you look at a few teams, their fourth line and some of their sixth or seventh defenders are power play specialists, penalty kill specialists, and it's starting to pay off. Though I guess Montreal, one of their big specialists last year, is now on Tampa Bay because he lost back-to-back cups against Tampa Bay. But players like Corey Perry, they are a specialist on the power play. You've got certain players like, even though Mitch Marner has his moments, he is a very good forward. I would be more apt to call him a penalty kill specialist at this point because the things that he can do, players like that are starting to take over special teams because it's no longer just pass the puck to the best player on the ice and they're going to score. That only works if you're Edmonton.
Yeah, I mean, you're not wrong. That's kind of where we're sitting right now. It's just like, I mean, see, and again, I'm going to go to the Homer situation of you look at McKinnon, and even he is struggling. I mean, Tampa Bay is running into the situation too of Kucherov being out. That's a big loss. Like
it's a big loss, but they made through last year. So as much as they've made it to the playoffs without Stamkos before, they just have a solid team. I agree with you. I think things have been figured out. That style from some of the best offenses in the league, and they have to find a new way. I was saying with you earlier today, I wonder if we see some of these teams start to look back at going into 3 forwards, 2 defense, or if they mix up. The quarterback is no longer at the blue line, because if you watch the Leafs, we'll use them as an example because it's very easy. Even lately, Marner and Riley have been hanging out near the blue line more. It's not just the one defender back. They're trying to do different things. But teams are doing a much better job at smothering, especially on the penalty kill. It's ridiculous. And then you get teams that make no sense that they can score at seemingly will that were terrible last year.
Yeah, like if you look at Edmonton's power play percent, and I mean, obviously you've got McDavid and Draisaitl. The two of them alone are fantastic, but they're almost at 50%. They are nearly at 50% power play percent. And that is, I mean, it's a small sample size.
It's unsustainable.
We're 7 games in, roughly.
But it honestly makes no sense. So Edmonton right now, 42.9%. Okay, they're 5-1. And actually, as you go down the list, there's only one team that is surprising in kind of the top 10. That's the Anaheim Ducks. They're 2-4 right now. They're 28.6%. That is what the best teams in the league should be, not a team that is hard carried by one of the most underrated goalies in the league night in, night out.
Now, speaking of goalies, and I'm really glad that you brought this up, and I didn't have to segue unnaturally to this. So, goalies are also looking in a bizarre category right now, especially if you're going to be looking at the bottom tier when it comes to goals against average. You've got the Vezina winner. And I understand that, Fleury was traded for pretty much a bag of pucks. And he was traded to a team that was, in theory, supposed to have a better defensive lineup than they expected to. But as most analysts said, Seth Jones is not worth the contract.
No.
But you've got Marc-Andre Fleury struggling Like, that is an understatement of how poorly he's been playing. But it's not just him. You've also got a Vezina candidate, somebody that was in the top 3 last year, of Grubauer. Now, the common denominator of the two of them is they both changed teams in the offseason. And you've got Grubauer, who's going to be sitting on the Kraken. But at the same time, it's really interesting to see those two slip so far. And again, coming from the Colorado side of things, Brian, you can attest to this. I never trusted Philip Grubauer.
No, from moment one. And looking, just to an aside quick here, I've got the stats up right now. This is including goalies that have only played one game. Marc-Andre Fleury is the 3rd worst save percentage goalie in the league right now, an .839. You go to number 12 at an .883. That is Philip Grubauer. It makes no sense. But yes, Flower is the reigning Vezina trophy winner, though I'm of the mindset that that was more of a, here, we didn't give it to you before, so have it now before you retire, Flower type
It's
thing.
kind of like how Lord of the Rings Return of the King won like 14 or 400 of those, the Oscars, because it was like, we didn't give you any before, here's just the rest of them. Like, it was a consolation prize for a season that he really wasn't the best goalie.
And look at the top right now. It's aside from, I don't even know which name on this list is the stranger thing to me. The fact that outside of goalies that have played one game, the best goalie in the NHL right now is James Reimer. He's a .961, number 2. This shouldn't be a surprise to anyone who watched hockey in the last little bit and doesn't just watch their home team, is Elvis Merlinkins, who is
Merlinkins.
Sorry. He is an unbelievable goalie. He is one of those that could carry a franchise that everybody thought was going to be a bottom feeder in the toughest division in hockey into a potential spot. And somehow, who would have guessed this one? 2 of the top 6 goalies in the league are on the Buffalo Sabres. Craig Anderson, who said he was going to retire, who is 3-1 right now with a .944, and Dustin Tokarski, who is 1-0-1 with a .950 save percentage. This league makes no sense. As you said, it's such an early amount of sample size. But Braden Holtby, who struggled last year, Matt Murray, who struggled last year, they're all up there. Tristan Jarry, who struggled last year, he's on the list. Well, it's an opposite year, so Bobrovsky has to be good after he had a bad year last year. And
True.
This one, which Leaf fans, I think they're getting the confirmation of, Frederik Andersen, he is 5-0. He's got a .946. Was it the defense in front of him?
So I saw a really good tweet the other day. I can't remember who it was, so I apologize. Otherwise, I would have credited to the person that tweeted it out. But I saw a tweet that said that the Leafs had him, and he was injured the entire time. This was a man that was playing with injuries all over his body. And they finally found somebody that was able to go into net and protect the net and carry them to the playoffs without the need of Freddie pushing himself. So he was able to take the time and get healthy. So he gets healthy, and they trade him away. And this is what a healthy Frederik Andersen looks like. He's a fantastic goalie. He really, truly is. So, I mean, it's also very helpful that you've got incredible defensive defensemen like Jacob Slavin, for instance, in front of you. And you've got a team like Carolina that are a defensive-minded offensive team. Brendan Moore has created a very, very, very good team there. With his development and everything, obviously, it's more than just him, but even still, Frederik Andersen is in a fantastic position to really show his skills. And in my opinion right now, I would actually say for like way, way too early
way too early takes?
Way too early predictions, he will be in the top 3 for Vezina.
I don't think that is too far of a stretch out with the health aside. But the reason why I was going with the side of the Leafs defense was the big problem. If you pull up Freddie's October stats, that has statistically been his worst month. The Leafs have never had a good start to their season. He goes to a new team. He becomes, the second goaltender in NHL history to start 5-0 with a new franchise. And he's not stopping anytime soon, at least for the Leafs. I mean, they're riding Jack Campbell like crazy right now. He's started 7 games. He's still putting up a .918 for them, which is great numbers. It's just there's a whole bunch of other issues there. And I love looking at this list of goaltender names, though, because if you were doing a fantasy draft at the beginning of the year, there might be 1 or 2 names on this list that may have made it onto your team. And there's a lot of goalies right now that are just stealing games, or they're making that comeback. Like Koskinen was supposed to be a wash for Edmonton. Holtby was supposed to be, he's played 5 games. He's back. You watched him last year with Vancouver. It's like, well, Holtby's done. He's not going to get another start in the NHL. Maybe that's why we are seeing some of these high caliber offenses struggling on their power plays, is some of these goalies, they've figured it out. They've had that extra time with the new equipment that came in a few years ago, and it's kind of that balance back and forth. And who knows, if this keeps up, maybe we get another goalies have to change their equipment in the offseason type situation coming up.
Potentially. I mean, another thing that I kind of want to point out too is shot quality. And this is going to be my segue into the Toronto Maple Leafs. So I understand that Austin Matthews is a superstar. I get that. But the way he is shooting does not scream superstar to me. He has hit the logo of the goalie more times than he's hit anywhere else in the past few games. Now, obviously, this is eye test. I don't have stats or anything to back that up, unfortunately. I'm a stats nerd. I would love to have that. But if you watch the games, the shots they're taking, they're just Hail Marying them on net, or they're shooting them at the body of the goalie. And that's a wasted opportunity. And that, I think, is probably the best way to describe the Leafs start right now, is wasted opportunities. Every single game is a wasted opportunity.
They have 4 players in the top 10 of the NHL for shots on net. Morgan Rielly, number 1. TJ Brody, number 3. So 2 defensemen, that makes sense. Actually, the top 5 are all defensemen. Number 6, William Nylander, and then you add in Jake Muzzin at number 8, and surprise, 11 and 12, Tavares and Marner. They're just throwing pucks on net, which, yes, you have to do, but if you're not doing it in those high danger where there's traffic in front, it's not going to do anything. And we're seeing the puck goes in. Oh, shot went wide, or shot was easily blocked, and then the puck goes the other way, and suddenly it's the Leafs trying to chase again. They have all this ozone possession, which has been the fancy stat this year that everybody's been looking at for the Leafs. Look at their possession. Their numbers are incredible. Well, it's because they're just lobbing nothing at the goalie, and it's no problem for them to deal with.
Yeah, like I could have great puck possession. If I was on the ice, I would just skate around with it. I'm not going to be able to shoot the puck or anything like that, but if I skate around with the puck and dance around with it, yeah, I'm going to have great puck possession, but who gives a crap? Who cares? Who cares if you have the puck that long if you can't put it in the net? It's as simple as that. And you watch them, they dance around and they do all these fancy dancy things, and then they lose the puck or they shoot it, and it's an easy shot that's blocked, or they miss. It's in my opinion the reason why they're struggling so bad, and it's because the shot quality isn't there. And it's not so much about high danger or anything like that. They're putting it at the goalie. They're not picking corners like they used to. That was something that Matthews killed at. He could pick a corner like nobody else, but he keeps putting it at the goalie. Marner is the same thing. Tavares threw that Hail Mary the other night, just the backhand that went in. Same thing with Kampf. It's just these fluky goals that are happening, and then you've got Nylander, who actually is showing the skill that is expected of the other people that are making way too much money.
He is honestly, looking back at his contract, I still hear people say that, oh, he's overpaid. He is the best value contract that the Toronto Maple Leafs have on their team, and it's okay. We're talking about shots.
Hold on.
Who do you think on the Leafs has the best shooting percent?
It's got to be Jason Spezza.
Jason Spezza, number 1. Number 2, Kerfoot. Number 3, he had his first goal last night in David Kampf. This team makes no sense. Austin Matthews is shooting at a 4.6. He will get those goals.
Yeah.
That is a given. But Mitch Marner has 24 shots. He has 0 goals. Morgan Riley, 20 shots, 0 goals.
Yeah.
There's something in the water, and those pucks are not going in, and it's early for the Leafs. There's still time for them to figure it out, but we saw it in the shortened season last year. The Ottawa Senators, they started a little bit too slow. They couldn't catch back up. Yeah, you've got a bigger runway when there's 82 games, but we've seen it in the past where teams that can't get going early, if they can't figure it out, they're dead in the water, and if the $40 million players, well, we'll say 30-something because Nylander's figured it out, can't start doing something, they're going to be looking like, I hate to say this to you, the Avalanche or the Vegas Golden Knights, the teams that are supposed to be at the top of the standings that are currently at the bottom. The New York Islanders are that way as well. At least Boston has a winning record, but it makes no sense, and will a change come? I think if they lost to Chicago on Wednesday, we would be seeing a much different team Saturday night facing Detroit.
Yeah, and the one thing that I want to say is if you're going to be watching the Leafs game tonight, or tonight being what is it going to be, the 30th? The 30th. If you're going to be watching the Leafs game tonight, Saturday the 30th, and they're looking like they have in their past 8 games or 7 games, take a look where their shots are going and tell me if I'm right or if I'm wrong. Tell me if those shots look good to you, because once they change that, once they're able to, get rid of those yips, whatever is in their head, whatever is, causing their hands to turn into bricks. Like you look at Marner's hands and he can't do anything. Last time he was dancing around, he was doing everything. He had a shade of it in the last game against Chicago, but he can't do anything. He would undress people left, right, and center. Like they gave him that in NHL 22 as one of his features, and he can't do it. So watch the shot quality, and if it's as bad as it has been, then they're going to continue that streak until somebody shakes it off. There's something wrong with the way that they're picking their shots.
And if Marner and Matthews are not your number 1 and your number 2 point getter, they will not win games. They will not make it out of the first round. Nylander can only carry them so far. And this Leafs team, I hate watch them because my entire family is Leaf fans. I've never really been a Leaf fan, but they're fun to watch because of players like Marner and Matthews. But can we be honest? They have not been fun to watch lately. They've been a very pedestrian, boring team that looks like they're trying to fight for the number 1 overall draft pick. It's
not good. Their gameplay is poor. They look sluggish. Matthews last night was the only time that I saw him doing something that seemed like really aggressive and going out there and doing that stuff. But the reason I like to watch them is because I don't think I can watch the Colorado Avalanche until they figure out what's going on. Granted, their games start at 10 o'clock usually, but even still, I really want to discuss that because you've got it's funny, the 2 teams that we support. I'm a big Colorado Avalanche fan. Brian, you're a New Jersey Devils fan, and our roles have flipped. It was Colorado was supposed to be the President's Trophy. It was already written in stone. It was just a question of how far they'd go in the Stanley Cup playoffs. But
I think you can still place a bet right now, and they are still the highest odds in the NHL to end up with the President's Trophy.
I will be I would not be shocked if they were fighting for a wild card spot in March, in April.
Right now, they are 28th in the league, by the way, in the 32 team NHL that exists now.
And it's frustrating because So I'm a big fan of goalies. I like goalies. I think they're cool. I used to play goalie growing up. And Darcy Kemper, in my opinion, is one of the best goaltenders in the league. You've got Darcy Kemper. You've got the two fantastic goalies on Columbus. They blow me away, those two. You've got Elvis Merlinkins, and then, I can't think of the second one off the top of my head. But the two of them there are amazing. And then, Darcy Kemper was one of my favorite goaltenders in the league. And he was playing for Arizona, which means that he was pretty much, playing hockey with a whole bunch of pylons in front of him. And he was putting up numbers that were incredible. So the moment that he said, bye, Grubauer, enjoy your $10 million or something ridiculous over in Seattle, we're going to bring in Darcy Kemper, I was just like, yes, here we go. The cup is ours. And he's
a
trying.
900 goalie right now with a 3.22 goals against average. But I think we were talking about this. It's the defense with Colorado. They're missing. The superstars are there. McKinnon's back. Landeskog's no longer suspended. But especially in not the preseason, but in this part of the season, if your defense core is not all there, then you're going to run into issues where a goalie that stole games for Arizona looks like he is the backup of the backup for what is supposed to be the best team in the NHL.
Yeah, they've got a Hutch in net right now, which they've done that before, and he looked better than Kemper does right now. And the one thing that I keep looking at, and they're trying really hard to figure out their pairings with key players out, and one of their biggest players that they're missing right now is Devon Toews. And the pairing of Toews and Makar is a fantastic pairing. They complement each other perfectly. Toews, he doesn't really want to go to the net. Makar, he absolutely wants to go to the net. So Toews is able to kind of fill that void of a defenseman, and Makar kind of plays that sort of offense, sort of like a fourth shooter. But if there's a break, if somebody gets the puck, somebody pokes it away, and they start going for a rush, Toews is almost always there, and Makar is quick enough that he can catch up. Right now, they're playing Byram and Makar, and that sounds like, holy crap, those two are fantastic players, and they're not wrong. They are fantastic players, but that is the absolute wrong pairing. You've got two people that are willing to rush the net, that you've got two people that are trying to score goals. They're offense first, defense second. If one of them rushes in, the other one has to then fight their instincts to not rush in. And that's not what you want you don't want your hockey players that you drafted, that you trained, that you did all these things, to ignore their instincts, to go against what they've known, how they play, how they've trained. And that's what the Colorado Avalanche's situation is right now. And it's clear as day when you look at the shots on goal. They last season had some of the lowest quantity of shots on goal. And this season, they're at the bottom when it comes to the amount. They're, I think, in the bottom 10 for the highest amount of shots on goal that are on their own net. Not them taking the shots, but the ones that are peppering Darcy Kemper. I feel bad for that guy. He is in net right now with a bunch of defensemen that are fantastic defenders, but are matched up so poorly because key players are hurt and they can't find the right replacements.
And I think that's going to be the theme for a lot of teams this year. If you, like what you said, you can take the exact same argument, you can shift that towards Tampa. Yeah, they've had some wins, but they've still struggled against some of the lower tier teams. You could do the same thing with Vegas. You can move it across the board. And as much as we want to be hard on these players, we have seen some that were on the COVID-19 protocol coming back. You can tell that there is a step missing still, that it still could take a little while. For all we know, that could be part of why McKinnon doesn't quite look like McKinnon yet. These players are all double vaxxed, minus technically 3 now in the league. There's one that has a shot, so there's 4 in the league. But we heard from players last year that maybe now we're starting to see some of those side effects from those players that had it. But at the end of the day, it's an excuse for some of the best players in the world who are just missing simple assignments, or they're not being paired up right. Look at Vancouver. They have a similar player to what Makar is. He has a defender's defenseman who may only ever get a point if he passes it to Hughes, glued to him. Mm-hmm. That is what the Avs did 2 years ago. That is what the Avs did last year. And now it's almost like they've panicked and went, well, let's put all the best players out at once and see what happens.
Yeah, well, and I mean, you stole one of our best players, one of our best defensemen with Ryan Graves. Like, he was defense first, but he could still put up offense. Like, he was this kid, just a child on skates. And he had the best plus minus in the league by a lot. He was killing it. And then they said to themselves, well, we'd rather lose Donskoy than Graves for nothing. So we were able to at least get some quality pieces from it, some, down the road situations. But it's really tough to see a team that's been touted as one of the best defensive teams in the league become literally one of the worst for shots against per game. And that, to me, is indicative of poor defensemen. And you look at Edmonton, and they are leading the league with shots against per game. And they're riding on Koskinen and Mike Smith to pull them out. And I mean, you've got Mike Smith, and he's 922 years old. Like, there's no way his back and his chest and his eyes and his brain. Like, I mean, I joke, but like, goalies age out. That's what happens, and it's amazing. Well,
and the thing is, you bring up Edmonton, they've kind of outscored a bit of their problem with that. They're 5-1-0 right now. McDavid has 15 points in 6 games. Leon Draisaitl has 12 points in 6 games. Their new acquisition, Zach Hyman, who the Leaf fans, I think, now that is their worst fear, is that he was going to go on and do great things in Edmonton. He is showing why he was such a big part of that Leaf squad. Edmonton is outscoring a lot of their problems right now. That is what the Leafs used to do. That is what the Avs did last year when Grew had some of those off days. That is what Vegas did last year when Flower had a bad game, when maybe Leonard came in a little bit cold, or vice versa. You never really had that problem with Vasilevsky because he's Andre Vasilevsky, but
he's a monster.
It's one of those weird seasons. Yes, it's way too early. Honestly, I could see if we were to jump ahead to January, we're about a month away from the Olympic break, being like, looking back on this, going, wow, we were really wrong. Or
yeah, we overreacted.
Or being like, oh, some of those teams actually made changes to their defense because they realized that was part of the problem.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously, these are way too early takes, and it's us maybe not overreacting, but it's shocking, and that's the reason why so many people, especially the Leafs fans, like, I think my favorite thing in the world right now is Leafs Twitter. They win a game over a team that was like, that hadn't won a game, that hadn't held a lead all year, and they win a game in overtime. They squeak a win against this team that's been a struggle bus from start.
And the Leafs were down 2-0.
I mean, they came back and they did it, and it was JT and Marner the first goal, and then, everyone expected David Kampf to get the second. But even still, I don't know. I don't know how to articulate it even, but it's just, I love watching Leafs Twitter with every single loss and every single win. It is the end of the world, and it's pretty much, Montreal winning one game in the Stanley Cup Finals, and they loot and riot. Like, it's the same thing, but it's the Twitter version of it, and I love it. I eat it up. It is better than a morning coffee. I don't eat breakfast because all I need is those damn tweets, and they sustain me for hours.
That is called Schadenfreude, my friend.
Love it.
I agree. Honestly, if you are a Leafs fan, staying off Twitter is probably the best for your health, especially
absolutely.
When the Buffalo Sabres fans start chiming in now, which we haven't talked about. They were supposed to be the team that was going to go 0, 82, and 0. They are currently 4-1-1. Jeff Skinner, where did he come from? Suddenly he's playing like he's a $4 million player, not quite a $9 million player. They don't have Jack Eichel. That saga is still going on. That is an entirely mind-blowing thing, which apparently now, surprise, Vegas is in on. Who would have thought they're in on every player?
Oh, they're gonna pick up Eichel and then dump him again, like they do with most of their players that they like.
Though I think from everything that I've heard, even if they were to get Eichel at this point with the surgery, he wouldn't even be able to come back this season. So it's one of those weird things. But there are two teams I'm looking at right now, Buffalo and Detroit. They are supposed to be the bottom feeders. They both have some of the best records in the league. They are fun to watch because the young kids are just being allowed to do whatever they want to do. There's still the structure there, but they're also getting goaltending, something that actually both teams did get a lot of last year. But their defense, like Buffalo, Rasmus Dahlin, first overall pick from a few years ago, his contract, if you look at it, that's going to be a McKinnon-esque, like, oh, he makes that little? He does that much for the team? And you want to talk about Leaf fans like going nuts? They look up the standings. Who's above them? Both Detroit and Buffalo. The two teams that are within throwing distance of where they are. And Ottawa, yeah, they're 2 games. They've played 2 less games. They could easily jump above the way that Ottawa has been playing. Washington is very lucky that Ovechkin is going for the all-time goal record, because he should have been suspended for that boarding that he did on Nick Paul in that unreal double hat trick game, including one from Batherson that took place earlier this week.
Yeah, and I mean that's another thing too that's been really weird and bizarre about this season. If we're continuing the streak of bizarre, is the suspensions. So obviously we've seen a few of them coming in, Thornton with the spear, if we want to call it that, but then you've also got the non-calls that I find are really interesting. So like you mentioned, Ovechkin, to me, that if it's not a suspension, it's at least a fine. Like
it wasn't even
was
a penalty.
Dangerous hit.
They didn't even call it on the ice. It's been really bad. At least they're finally calling more of the cross-checks. That was the big change in the offseason, and it's finally starting to look like players aren't going to be coming off the ice with their back looking like they've just been lashed, because it was really bad in the past. But some of the boardings this year, it's almost like they can't cross-check, so now they're squaring up for the numbers, and they're going after players.
It's why can't, when you have to change something, like they cracked down on slashing and then cross-checking went out of control. So they're now going to crack down on cross-checking. And then this coming season, after somebody is like we're going to see a really, really, really scary injury this season, because they're so focused on cross-checks that they're not ignoring, but they're just not really putting the same amount of attention into boarding as they used to. And you're going to see someone get very injured, and they're going to be out for an extended period of time. And then they're going to go, oh, shoot, maybe we should be focusing on boarding a bit more. And it's like, yeah, of course. That, like, as much as cross-checking is, it's chipping away at the dexterity of a person's back, the boarding, that's dangerous. That is like fighting.
The player getting hit can't defend himself.
No, and
that's the worst part.
You look at what Stamkos did to Girard, and that one, the other day, and Girard is now day-to-day. He's not playing for Colorado, but he boarded Girard, and there was no penalty, and there was no fines, and they didn't even call him afterwards to be like, hey, we might want to look into this. They didn't even do that. And then what happens the next game he plays? He puts a shoulder into Dylan Cousins' face, knocks him to the ice, and again, no penalty, no calls, nothing. So is it because it's Stamkos and he can do what he wants until something serious happens? Like, I think injuring someone is that.
The Lightning are a dirty team. Don't tell anybody that. Go back and watch. They are such a dirty hitting team. They are. It's crazy if you watch. Like, they've got great players, but they're always doing that extra little, oh, there's an elbow to your chin, or oh, we kind of might have just speared you a little bit. The ref didn't see it. Don't worry about it. I'm a superstar, so they won't even bother finding me. At least now, going to my team, they're finally going after Subban for the slew footing that he does. He has done that for a long time. Now that he is not a true superstar, he is still a great player. He's getting called on them. He's getting called out a lot on them because he's done it for years. And it's one of those things at the NHL. Yeah, for Ovi, we talked about that. I get that he's chasing an unbreakable record, but if you don't set the precedent for the Stars, then everybody else is they're going to go crazy. And what happens then if down the road, you've got Ottawa playing against Washington, and the reverse happens. Nick Paul boards Ovi, and Ovi gets hurt because of the revenge, because there's nothing done. It's one of those problems that, as you said, the NHL fixed one, or so they thought, and then something else comes out. Developers know you fix one bug and then 7 other things break. It's just how it works.
Exactly. And the NHL is very well known for rivalries and repercussions to things that happen. Like, I mean, again, as a Colorado fan, you go back to Colorado versus Detroit. I mean, those games were amazing to watch. Like, don't get me wrong. I miss that era a bit. But at the same time, that happened because not enough happened. Because a very serious injury happened. Obviously, it's a little bit more of an extreme example. But you look at all these other teams, like, it escalates until someone gets seriously hurt. And the more that they ignore these boarding penalties and these not taking the steps to say, hey, what you did was wrong. You like, even if it's a slap on the wrist of $5,000 to Stamkos, who, he could sneeze that money, it's still showing that you can't do this. And there are repercussions to it. Because if his name gets put in that list of you have that, he's now, if he does it again, like, in theory, he hit Girard head first into the boards, then he hit Cousins with his shoulder in the head. That's a repeat offender. That means if he keeps doing it, then he gets suspensions.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us on the first episode of the Ice Prep podcast. I have the feeling, and I think Pat's in agreement, that there's going to be a lot of takes that are going to be bad in a few weeks or a few months. A lot that you probably don't agree with, but hopefully we gave you something different to think about. It's something that Pat and I have talked about off and on in hockey for I don't know how many years now. You mentioned it earlier. I have the feeling both of our wives are going to be happy that they don't have to deal with hearing this anymore.
Yeah, no. The one thing that I really pride myself on is really bad takes, or at least spicy takes. So if you want to hear my terrible opinions about certain things, please keep listening, because I love being able to rant about hockey, especially if it annoys people.
And I can say that next week we will be doing a handful of way too early takes in the NHL with what has happened so far this year, from best forwards to worst forwards, defensemen, goalies, teams, you name it. Looking forward to that one. Hopefully we at least get one right.
No, we'll see. I don't know. I'm pretty sure that I'm going to get probably 80 to 90% of my guesses incorrect, because that's usually my accuracy when it comes to way too early takes.
It's still better shooting percentage than the Leafs.
That's true.
Well, thank you, everybody, for joining Pat and I on our first episode. You can follow our socials. We have all of them: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Ice Prep Podcast. We'll be posting stuff there periodically throughout the week as well, in preparation for these episodes that will be dropping every Saturday. As well, you can listen to us on every major podcast platform, which is kind of cool. Follow us on social media at Ice Prep Podcast. You can also find the show on every major podcast network. This has been a presentation of Woodland Media.